Jane, we were just talking before we went live, so I think we are now live. So hello, anyone that's following us along. So we've got Jane, who is in Sydney. Then Gary is up there in Brisbane. Struggling, aren't you, Gary?
Yep, struggling. It's tough up here. It's only 28, so it's a bit chilly.
Yeah, so if there's anything we can do to help, if people want to send blankets or jumpers and so on, that might be helpful to Gary. And then Paul, you're in Adelaide.
I am.
How's life in Adelaide at the moment?
Yeah, well, I've got a jumper on, it's not too cold. It's very pleasant, and like everywhere else in Australia, we're shut down.
Yeah, yep. So we're all. It's one of the awful but great things about this is that we are, no one's the exception. That something that we all share and are muddling through together, and it kind of I think it curtails some of the whinging that you could happen if one place was out of kilter with another. But at the moment, we are genuinely all in this together, as they say.
Although I thought it was interesting that Western Australia was the state that seceded first, and closed their boundaries. You guys have always wanted to do that, haven't you?
It has been very emotional few weeks for us as the dream that we voted for in the 1930s has finally come to fruition.
The Kingdom of Western Australia. Yeah,
it's very emotional time over here for us. Exciting, but no. Hey, Jane, we were just talking offline, and I was getting some free therapy from you as you were talking about things that have gone wrong in your church as you've moved to online. And we've had things go wrong at our church. And I think Facebook and Twitter kind of skew towards things that go well. And so I'm always on the lookout for things that haven't gone well to make me feel better. So tell us about how it's been for you guys at Petersham as you've gone online.
Yeah, so I'm at Petersham Anglican, which is combined. We've got two services, and combined it would be about maybe 150 on a good Sunday. And over the weeks, we've gradually got, I'm not on staff there, I'm a parishioner there, but gradually over the weeks, it's developed more and more. But we did have a technical glitch a couple of weeks ago, and then yesterday, when one of the guys was leading us in prayer, the whole thing dropped out, and then, the poor staff person ended up uploading the sermon a few minutes later because that had been pre-recorded, so we're able to listen to the sermon, but it was, it was obviously disjointed and, didn't obviously then lead nicely into chat rooms for morning tea and things like that. So it's just part of life now. Yeah, and it's church is very ordinary, but in lots of ways, and that's an example of it. But it was really profound still what was able to happen in terms of hearing God's word, praying, and hearing a sermon from the Psalm.
Yeah. I really was kind of perversely blessed by hearing that things went wrong, and we've had. I think on the first Sunday we did it live, so we were streaming in the building that we rent, and that was kind of okay, but terrifying. And there was this room of I think that we've got a really competent staff team, and we were all kind of sweating bullets as this thing went live. And we've had had a humorous situation where we do a thing where we broadcast it through someone's computer on Zoom, and then Zoom allows for breakout rooms. Maybe that's what you guys are doing, and chats and so on. And that's been a really good function. But we had it was too nerve-wracking for the host to also do the tech. So now we've got someone else who does the tech, and the person who was doing the tech had their microphone on when something was going wrong, and the whole
oh no yeah.
The whole church heard him or her communicating their frustration as tech was going wrong. But that was kind of fun, and we all enjoyed that next day. But I think it is again one of the things I've have enjoyed about this that feature of this season is that historically it is well-resourced churches who already had a high value on media and production and stuff that were ready to ship, and then the rest of us suddenly went into content production and broadcasting in a 5 or 6 day period. And it does mean that you get a lot more material out there that's got more gravel in it, that's a bit more earthy, and its purpose is to serve the local community. And I think that, to me, there's an analogy there. I find I'll often download a sermon, and as much as it's great to hear a sermon from a great preacher like a Tim Keller or someone like that, often I find the local preacher at a local church whose sermons are online sometimes has paid more attention, worked harder with the text maybe than some of the more seasoned guys, and so there's all sorts of unintended blessings, I think, in having a whole lot of the rest of us finding our ways online in these times. Paul, you're in a no, I should say I'm not supposed to be sharing this, but here I go.
I just go on ahead, Roy. Just do what comes naturally.
Paul, I was interested in you guys in Adelaide, especially you guys are in a network, and wondering if you guys have been able to leverage that or what you've experienced in you've got 12 or 14 churches or something, and
we got the 10 locations, 16 congregations, I think is roughly what it is. So I think what was really helpful for us is that we were slightly in front of the government on when we thought we were going to close. So we made a decision, I think, about 4 or 5 days before the announcement that we were going to close our gatherings and go online, which gave us a helpful lead time into it. So we had people working on that for all the churches and congregations and setting up and thinking through platform stuff and that sort of thing. So that was helpful, I think. Having a combined team of 10, 12 pastors trying to work this sort of stuff out in advance. Yeah. And then each of the sort of 10 locations have tried to do their own service and connect with people locally. But what we found is we've been getting crossover benefits, not just on platform and stuff, but we've got a combined resource library that we can all draw on, for music or kids stuff, and even preaching if it's needed. Some of our churches are now moving into second term with a combined preaching program. So I think that we're constantly talking. The pastors are meeting once a week for an hour, thinking stuff through. It's been, I think it's been helpful for us all. Yeah.
Yeah, we've got over here in Perth, we've got the world's smallest network. There's only 2 churches in the network. So it's a bit like Texas, the bigger the hat, the smaller the ranch. And we are in our we've got 4 Sunday services, two locations and 2 churches. And I think in peacetime, in ways that I think are good and healthy, we often differentiate ourselves and really lean into the local situation. And there's a kind of a creative and productive differentiation. Whereas I find in the crisis, in the pandemic, it's pushed us closer together, and we're more inclined to talk about what we share than what in the ways that we differ. And we've ended up with something a bit like a kind of like the National Cabinet, where we're more keenly sharing resources and less ginger about that. And I think there's kind of an XY graph there, where if we were completely franchised, I think we would break faith with the local mission. But if we were spending our whole lives trying to say why we're different from the other people in the network, we lose some leverage and some fellowship and so on. And I think this has been a good season for our network to own each other, not just in administrative and functional ways, but I think in spiritual ways, that we share in the one Spirit and call on the one Lord. And it's a season in which, as our competencies are tested, because we're not a media company, our spiritual wares are being brought to the fore. And I think leadership becomes, Mark Sayers has talked about this, that leadership becomes less a competence exercise and more a spiritual exercise of being able to authentically lead your community through the Word of God and prayer. So in a number of ways, I think we've found it to be an interesting season spiritually, not a hiccup-free season, but interesting. How about what's happening in education, Gary?
Well, I mean, it's interesting. I was going to ask you too. As in particular, is that what's happening? Because they're sitting for us. Paul gave me a hard time for saying this the other day. I've actually had more time to read, because what is being pulled out of our lives effectively are the 70 or 80 conversations that I have with students in any given week, because there are 4 of us in the building, and you just can't. You can maintain some kind of pastoral contact with a limited number of people. but you can't have, you know, a 2-minute catch up on the way to morning tea, or, you know, a question at the end of a class that then spins into another conversation. All that has been stripped out. So I think I suspect those of us who are not actually in pastoral ministry, we find ourselves, a lot of us, and I think this is true in society, I think there are a lot of people who have more time, but unusually, like, you know, looking at, you know, my pastor and our staff and hearing you guys talk, it's the pastors, the staff team have been, you know, foot to the floor, really stressed, desperately trying to get church out on Sunday. And as you said, you know, in areas that lots of us just didn't have any competency. But, you know, I just wonder, I mean, do you think it's getting to the stage where we're starting to find some kind of rhythm in doing church? So is that forcing people? Is it now that pastors are starting to think, okay, how are you a pastor? How do you do evangelism in this space now that we've got beyond, you know, the initial crisis of video editing, or, you know, learning how to put people in chat rooms and Zoom and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, they're acute observations, I think, because that's certainly been true. And I think we've found that we've observed that that kind of two-speed economy, I think, where and it was a little bit, I guess, personally disconcerting for a lot of us, including me, that at one level you looked at your week and a whole lot of meetings and events had been evaporated, and yet there was this experience where you felt busier. That might not be the right word, but certainly under a pressure that wasn't true normally, and you would. I think there was a TGC article on this, but you'd go to bed feeling more tired than you would after a normal day, even though you'd achieved less, at least by some measurements, than you would have in a normal day. Because I think as you say, you know, God, praise God for Zoom, but it is a much more, it's a much less subtle way of communicating. You've got less of those intuitive sort of interactions and those little kind of touch base type things. Every meeting you have is an appointed meeting, nothing serendipitous. And so I think our staff team really worked very hard. And in fact, our elders very kindly gave us all a staggered 4 or 5 days off after the initial surge to gather strength for what looks like it'll be a more long-term situation. And I wouldn't want to call it too well. I think there's that two-speed thing. I wonder, it'd be interesting to talk to some AFES people in these conversations, because that's another world which is maybe analogous to yourself, Gary, where that parachurch world, if you're happy with that language, maybe it's been a slightly different experience from churches which do have this week by week. There's, you know, at base 52 times a year people expect a church to do something, and there's a kind of relentlessness to that. And I think my sense is that we're about to hit a new phase. When we saw this coming and we're getting ready, we talked about 7-day plans, 6-week plans, and 6-month plans. And I think our horizon's been dominated by the 7-day plan at the moment, to think, let's get through the next 7 days, let's work out how to do what we're doing, you know, iron out all the bugs and so on. And now we're looking towards the 6 weeks. And I think on that 6-week horizon, we're starting to think more in terms of evangelism. So we're doing a Hope from Home series and starting online book clubs and engaging people in this season where it's genuinely easy to get to church. You don't even have to be dressed to show up. And so I think where that 6-week season where things have settled a bit, I can see us getting a bit more expansive. And then the 6-month thing, that'll be interesting, because that's where I think we'll hit some of the more chronic pastoral situations where, you know, medium-term unemployment and mental health and stuff start to come to the fore. So they're my guesses, but other people will have their things.
Rory, I reckon it should have been 7 days, you know, 7 weeks and 7 months, actually.
We totally missed a trick there. You know, what were we thinking?
I do wonder, I mean, I was quite struck on Anzac Day. You know, I was quite surprised. Our youngest daughter plays the trumpet, you know, and she'd been in to play the last post at 6 a.m. But on our street, like, most of the neighbours were out in their driveway. And I think, you know, suddenly, I mean, I mean, the number of people out and about on any given afternoon or on any given morning is just massively increased. But, we've had sort of conversations, just kind of natural, often brief conversations with far more of our neighbours than we ever had. But I do just wonder when this window is going to close.
Yeah.
I think at the minute everybody is open to human contact. Obviously Anzac Day is always special, but there's a sense in which people felt the lack. And I do wonder, the people who were in their driveways, I suspect a greater proportion of people went out to their driveways than would have gone to an Anzac Day service. But I just think that's something we have to kind of capitalize on.
Yeah.
Especially those of us who feel that we do have more time. I think we're going to have to stop in a minute. But Jane, can I ask you, in the hope that you'll make me feel better and less of a slacker than these two guys? Have you felt like you've got a bit more time?
Well, yeah, at Moore, we've just had 2 weeks. We've had 2 weeks lecture-free period because we had our autumn break, and then we had a research week before that. So definitely over the last 2 weeks, and the week before that was our mission. So our mission was completely different. It was all online. So that was pretty intense. But so the last 2 weeks have been unusual. But today we started back our term proper. And so, lectures online, one-on-ones online, things like that. But I think for me personally, because I don't have young children, I'm not in local church ministry, I think my time is freer because I don't have as many meetings. I don't have lunchtime with students all the time. One thing I find really hard with it though is that when you do have a one-on-one, it's I don't feel like I can be as personal with the student one-on-one, or with someone I'm mentoring in ministry. It just feels very different because you're physically not face to face, and so the relationships are different. People are really honest and frank because a number of them are going through a hard time. So there is that, but it is different. I've been enjoying reading some good books, if that makes you feel better, Gary.
It does.
And also audiobooks. I think I find audiobooks good as well in terms of I've got a condition with my eye, so I'm not supposed to have a lot of screen time, which is not great for my job and also now. So there's been some good audiobooks as well.
What are you listening to?
Well, this is one that actually potentially would be good for listeners, is the John Piper one, the Christ and Coronavirus, just because it's free and it only takes about 2 hours to listen to. So that could be helpful for people just in terms of trusting God as our rock when everything else falls away. So, that's good. Yeah.
Well, I started to listen to The City of God, which I'd never read, whilst I was painting our front fence. So I listened to about 7.5 hours of it, or 8 hours, so the fence is finished. But unfortunately, I've still got 42 hours of The City of God to read.
There's a number of good ones around, but
Are you an audiobook person, Paul?
I'm not. No, I don't. I mean, time to time when I go on driving holidays, I'll listen to audiobooks, but generally I read books often just before I go to bed.
Yeah. Cool. And Gary will be on to you, but have you managed to read anything in this season or not?
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, Gary's been doing all the reading for me, which has been really helpful. No, I've read a couple of things. I've been reading, but less for pleasure, more for what I'm working on in terms of sermons and stuff like that. So, it's just been different. Mate, I think we've shot our time.
All right, we need to wrap up. Anyone want to give a final benediction or blessing or anything?
Yeah.
Very good. All right. Well, look, thank you very much, Jane. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Argos, for hosting. Been a pleasure, and I think these are going to be a regular feature. So come back here next time.